Welcome to Psychic Bent. My name is Carrie.
And I'm Kim. We are two sisters wanting to help other psychics learn and grow in their abilities and to help educate about spirits, angels, and everything psychic.
Hey listeners, welcome back to Psychic Bent. Carrie and I sure hope you enjoyed the episode last week where we told scary, spooky stories for the Halloween episode. I had a whole lot of fun doing that one. How about you, Carrie?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. What kills me is we didn't go with any of the well-known ghost stories like The Conjuring or, any of the, the Stanley Mansion. We didn't go with any of the well-known things, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, I was really surprised that neither one of us did that, so it was really neat.
So I don't know if that was just, it was obvious and we avoided it, or was, I was having fun just trying to find things that were different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so then on this episode, we are going to be discussing the differences between ghosts and spirits. We thought we would just continue on the theme into this week, and there really is a difference between the two.
Yes, there is.
So, Carrie, why don't you start us off with what you have for the differences between ghosts and spirits?
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to preface this with, like we talk about a lot, you got to find what information resonates with you. There's a lot of different theories out there. Wouldn't you agree, Kim, on the differences between a ghost and a spirit?
Oh, yeah. Even some people saying that they're the exact same thing.
Yes.
So
yes.
There's all kinds of stuff out there.
Right. So kind of do your research and see what resonates with you. Kim and I have always had the same belief system, I believe, between ghosts and spirits, which doesn't surprise me since we have a lot of things that we agree on the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of what we feel and what we just kind of think, and for ourselves, what the difference between is a ghost and spirit. If you believe something different, hey, that's great.
Right.
No one's saying one's right, one's wrong. This is what we kind of resonated with. And so we're going to jump right in from there. First of all, Kim has mentioned in prior episodes about it was the angel episode, I believe, Kim, with the 7 planes of existence.
Right.
And each plane has a different vibration rate. And we're always talking about raising your vibration to talk to angels, raising your vibration to talk to spirit. And this is a big example of the different planes of the vibration. So the lowest and densest speed of vibration, of course, is the physical plane that we're on, which this is what we are. But, as you go up, to the different levels, your vibration has to raise up to be able to communicate. And I like this particular, I went to purespiritual.com, and evidently so did Kim, which is not unusual for us we need to quit sharing a brain at some point. But this is, it was talking about that as well. And that's, something we've resonated. And I like how they refer to the angelic realm as the penthouse.
Yeah.
The 7th realm is the penthouse. I doubt I'll ever be able to get to the penthouse, but it's good to know there is one. The higher the soul travels to the level, the more divine and pure the soul becomes. Totally agree with that. After we physically die, the soul leaves your body, which we all know that, and will continue on with its spiritual journey. They will go back to the astral plane or the second plane of creation. And this is where the consciousness is focused between the lifetimes. So they go back and can review their life and everything there. So I think that a lot of times we don't think beyond, we're told a specific thing. And when you die, where you go. There's very many interesting theories on what happens when you die, where you go. And I was telling Kim offline, I was reading Echo Bodine is a very well-known psychic author. She teaches, she's a healer. And so she has an interesting perspective on, and I kind of agree with this, where whatever you think heaven is where you're going.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're very strict I was speaking to someone, it was last month. I believe it was last month. And they basically told me that they were going to go to hell because they are having relations with someone that they weren't married to, and that they were going to go to hell for that. And I was just kind of like, really? That's what you think?
Oh, that's what they believe. Yeah.
That's what they believe. And if they were to pass away tomorrow, don't want that to happen. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying is that's probably where they're going to go because that's where they think they should go. So, I mean, what do you think about that belief system?
Well, I think that a lot of religions teach those things, and that is what they expect their believers to believe and to not live that type of lifestyle. But then you have the people that don't believe anything, that you're
Exactly.
dead, you're done.
Right.
I think it's kind of narrow-minded that that's the belief as far as, oh my gosh, I did X, Y, and Z wrong, so I'm going to be going here forever and blah, blah, blah. When there's just so much more. I mean, there has to be
Yeah.
more because of we are just experiencing a small portion, minuscule portion of what is out there in our lifetimes.
Yes,
So,
and not to go down a different tangent, but you cannot tell me that if someone is suffering from severe depression and or substance abuse and they're in a bad mindset and they commit suicide, you can't tell me that because they're in such a tormented state during that period that they're going to spend eternity in a tormented state.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's just my personal thought process on that.
Well,
But
and here's mine on that since we're on this tangent, it is my belief that is what they signed up for in this life. There is a reason they had to
yes,
learn this lesson and be through this horrible point in their life, and they agreed
yes.
to
I
it,
mean, yeah, I fully believe in the soul contract, which is what you're referring to.
Yeah.
When it's your time, it is your time, and it's going to happen to all of us. So when it's our time, it's our time. Just a little tangent before we jump into the ghost and spirit differences. But so this is kind of where I would lead it was going with is we're not all going to maybe believe or think the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just some information that might be a paradigm shift for you. It might be something you've never thought about and thought, okay, yeah, I can see this. Or it might be like, oh, okay, Carrie and Kim are really out there today. So it's kind of like depending on your belief. We're just giving information, and a lot of times we do give information what we resonate with because we resonate with it. But like I said, do the research. So, and I'm going to touch on ghosts first. Now, when you look at ghosts, you can look at it from two separate perspectives. You have the perspective of the paranormal investigator
Mm-hmm.
who is out there looking for, you have two types of ghost haunts when you do paranormal investigation. You've got the residual and you have the intelligent.
Right.
Right. So the residual is just basically a movie loop playing over and over again, no interaction, no intelligence to it. It's just like an imprint of energy.
Right.
Right. So that's totally different than from what we call an intelligent haunt, which would be ghost. So I just want to make that little, there is two different kinds of ghosts we're dealing with from the paranormal investigation aspect of an intelligent ghost,
Right.
intelligent haunt.
Right. Yeah, it's just that loop. It's just an energy of loop
Mhm.
that has been left behind from the incident or the lifetime that took place there at that moment of usually the moment of their death, or a tragedy that happened in their life, or it could even be a happy time in their life. It's just a loop. They just keep replaying it. That's all it is. They are
Yeah.
not
It's like
really living it, feeling it, experiencing it. It's just watching a movie. That movie's just
yeah,
playing over and over again.
yeah. They're not even there.
Right.
It's just an imprint of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So ghosts are individuals who have passed across to the afterlife due to either a violent death or they have a sudden death or tragic passing or just died and they did not undergo the tunnel light experience. So they never crossed over, which means their soul remains partially earthbound. And so they may have interaction with living. They may also not have crossed over because if they were murdered, they want justice, or just have an extremely determined personality and they just didn't want to leave yet. It could be their state of mind, like any understanding that they actually passed over
Right.
and they're struggling with that news. Or they're generally a troubled soul that is disturbed with the knowledge of their own violent end and have reluctantly fully moved on to the next realm. Now, to go on to a side tangent here, which of course I do a lot, but we have watched Kindred Spirits, which is Amy and Adam, and they do paranormal investigation, and they were doing an investigation where they had a ghost that didn't know they had died.
Right. I remember that one.
And it was so sad. It was so sad because the woman and a friend they were going to another city and their car stalled on the railroad tracks and the train hit the car.
Mm-hmm.
And she died. And because that was a fast death, she didn't know she died.
Right.
And unfortunately, it was up to Amy and Adam to show her death certificate, explain what had happened, and then she did cross over. So, I mean, I think that's a very good example of how you could end up being a ghost.
Right, yeah.
You just didn't know. I also feel that you're afraid of being judged is another reason why you won't cross over.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. I don't want to go to hell. But when it's a case of a murder victim or a violent death, I do think that possibly you're going to have the ghost of the victim who's going to be wanting justice, wanting their body found, or wanting the person who did this to be discovered.
Mm-hmm.
I do fully believe in that. But ghosts do generally, like I said, have experienced a trauma in their life. They stick to a location. They can't move past the events. They may even linger, just like I said, seeking justification, wanting someone else to see what had happened. Their abilities vary, where some manifestations require more energy than others. So it's like, let's just say someone who's just recently passed. They're not going to have a lot of energy to communicate with you because they recently passed. They're learning how to communicate. They don't understand how to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And so but you do have some ghosts that can create sounds, smells, move objects, which we've talked about that before with you, Kim, when your mother-in-law comes to visit your grandma, you smell tobacco,
right,
different kinds of tobacco.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's basically what a ghost is someone who has passed or transitioned and has not crossed over. Sometimes they're just mischievous, which we've experienced that before.
Mm-hmm.
Slamming doors, moving objects, hearing footsteps. And some, like I said, so some can be very mischievous. Do you have anything to add to ghosts before I move on to spirit?
Well, also, some ghosts, they could also make you feel like you're overwhelmed with negative emotions and negative fear because they, as people, may have had those types of characteristics when they were alive. And while people could be experiencing coming in contact with a ghost like that, they could definitely pick on that negative and dark feelings that the ghosts could give you or make you feel. Even if it was somebody that was very cruel in life, you can feel that type of stuff when you are encountering that type of a soul that has not crossed over and they are in a place where you're at. Does that make sense?
It does. And we've talked about this before, that when you live in a haunted house, for a ghost to manifest, it needs energy.
Mm-hmm.
And where's it going to get the energy from?
Right, everything around you, whatever has
everything around you, or you,
Mm-hmm.
or you. Because at the old house I lived in, which was haunted, I had a terrible time keeping plants alive because that was an easy way to get energy, was from the plants.
Right.
If you're feeling lethargic a lot, you may want to have your house cleansed. Have someone come in who knows what they're doing and do a walkthrough and move the entities on. Now, I've done several house cleansings where nobody wants the entities to leave.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, they're not pets. Like in my situation, when the house I had was haunted, they were not there all the time. They were spirits. We just call them ghosts because that's the terminology that everybody's most comfortable stating, but there actually were spirits that came and go. They weren't there all the time. But when the ex-husband was bringing strays home, meaning spirits that he was collecting and bringing home, then that's where we were having issues with the energy. and the plant's not surviving and things like that because the ghosts need that energy. And if you live in a heavily haunted house, you could have side effects from that physically
Right.
and mentally.
Yeah. And a lot of times those ghosts are the ones that want to be noticed. They're the ones that want to scare you or spook you. Not really, maybe not scare you, but they get
Very mischievous.
it. Yeah, they get kind of a little thrill out of it, you know?
Yes. Yes. And most people, when they see a ghost, are not like us that go, oh, okay, it was just another ghost. Okay, where'd you come from? They freak out.
Right.
So I just think that if you have a haunted house and it's definitely a ghost and not a spirit, then you do need to have them be moved on,
Right.
or they have to move out.
Exactly. Exactly. They either have to behave, move on, or be pushed out or moved out, like you said.
Exactly. Yes.
The other thing about ghosts that I just wanted to touch upon is that's when you walk into somewhere and all of a sudden you get entire body of goosebumps or you get the chills because that's when you're feeling their energy because that's that ghost energy. Those spooky chills up your back, goosebumps and chills. That's ghost energy.
Yeah, I have on two separate occasions. One situation, I was doing a house cleansing and I was doing the walkthrough stage. And on that particular one, we were at an apartment over the garage. And I'm like, well, you got a man in here. He doesn't belong here, but he's not related to the land. He just kind of wandered in. And the person I was doing the cleansing for was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'm like, well, no, he doesn't belong here. He has no ties to this land. He's just hanging out. And I asked him, I said, can you let me show her where you're at? And he was willing to do that. And so I stuck my hand out and I told him, come over here and put your hand right here. And it was ice cold.
Mm.
But he didn't move away. He let her do that.
Hmm.
And it took energy for him to produce that ice cold.
Right.
And then we did the office that I am in, several departments, and one department had done a slight little remodel and new cubicles. And anything remodeling, you're stirring stuff up. You're
Yep.
going to get, anytime you're going to remodel at home, let everybody know that's in the house, living and non, what's going to happen, so you don't have upset entities. I was one morning with Monique, who desperately wants to see a ghost, and they're just being stubborn and not wanting her to see him. I'm like, hey, there's some ghosts over here. Why don't you come over here? And she's like, oh. And she goes, I don't see him. I said, no, but put your hand right here. And said, tell me what you feel. She goes, it's cold. I said, there you go. You have a ghost right there. She was excited about that, but on the other hand, she still wanted to see him.
She still wants to see him.
You can't have it all. They're right there. And then once everything settled down with the remodel, they went away.
Well, that figures.
They were just curious. They're obviously where I work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so let's jump into spirits. Now, spirits are positive light beings of someone who had a person or animal which has basically transitioned. So they've gone through the light and they've come back. So they're able to go between the physical plane after death, communicate with loved ones, go back and forth between the dimensions, between where beyond and earth plane. The spirits are those who are the surviving personalities who will pass through the door of death in a relatively normal fashion and have traveled through the tunnel of light to the upper astral plane. After a person crosses over the spiritual plane, they will still retain their personality, form, and identity, which comes across through a spiritual reading with them. So if a psychic were to do a reading, you would actually be able to talk about the personality, what they look like, how they dressed. So that's still going to come through in a reading. The only true difference between the living and the spirit is the world that they reside in. The living in the physical plane and the spirit in the spiritual plane. And we are divided by a very thin wall in the parallel universe. And sometimes you'll hear that wall referred to as a thin veil,
Mm-hmm.
which the veil is thinning right now because we're approaching Halloween.
Right.
In this particular episode, we haven't gotten to Halloween yet. And so the veil gets very thin during this period, which makes it easier to communicate with spirits.
Yeah.
A spirit can have an emotional connection to a person, usually a relative or loved one. They can come and visit them frequently, especially if that person is upset over an event that's happening in their life. Then the spirit the loved one will come to them. There's a wide variety of ways that a spirit might use to deliver a message or communicate with the living, such as through dreams, which is formally called visitations. In a dream, we are often more willing to pay close attention to small details. However, these visitations are more dismissed as wishful imagination because when you dream of a loved one, you really wish it is that loved one, but it usually is, but we kind of like, oh no, it wasn't. It was a good dream.
Yeah, we make the excuses for it like we do in life.
Yes,
In wake time,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes. And very often it's the way for spirit to communicate, interact with us, because we're not easily distracted when we're dreaming. It's easier for them to just come to us because you're not being left brained. You're not opposed to any interaction because you're dreaming.
Right.
But they can also interact, obviously, the same way as a ghost can. They can come to you, talk to you, and let themselves be known.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you have for spirits?
Well, I have that they have a very different energy, and that the energy that has crossed into the light and into higher energy planes is so much more positive and higher vibrating. You can definitely feel more energetic when being around a spirit. They actually release negativity associated with their physical life, meaning that people are upset and everything whenever they've passed, and that spirit is able to help you release that negative feelings that you're having about that person's passing and moving on. Of course, like I said, they bring positive energy and love. Spirits are settled energies, and they have passed over, so they're not in that turmoil or turbulence or lower vibration negativity and stuff like that the ghosts are in, that have not taken that final step in their transition. And they are full of love and forgiveness, and overall they want to just help you on your journey. And they are very peaceful. They're to guide us, as you've talked about, the spirit guides. It's all with love, it's none of the negative, harmful things like ego and everything else. They could be around for a long time or a short time. It just depends on what we are needing them to help us with in our personal life. That's about all I have on that.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to add for the difference between a ghost and a spirit?
During some of my research, I came across something that I found was really interesting, and it was called Types of Ghosts and Spirits. And I thought, I want to know what types are out there, besides what we just talked about, ghosts and spirits. The first one is the interactive personality, and that is the most common of all ghosts spotted. Are usually of a deceased person, someone you know, a family member, or perhaps even a historical figure. Now, these ghosts can be friendly or not, but often show themselves to others in a variety of ways. They can become visible, they can speak or make the noises, they can touch you, or even emit an odor like perfume or cigar smokes, stuff that you've already talked about, and they let you know they are there. And that experts say that this type of ghost retains its former personality, like you said, as when they were alive, and they can feel emotions. And often they are visiting you to comfort you or let you know something important. Then the next one is the ectoplasm or ectomist.
I've been slimed.
Exactly.
Like, I was waiting for that. I'm like, hi, get my Ghostbuster on.
Yeah. So if you've ever seen a mist or a fog that almost looks like it's swirling, if you have, you may be witnessing what the paranormal investigators call an ectomist or a ghostly mist. This is a vaporous cloud, usually appears several feet off the ground and can move swiftly or simply just stay still, almost like it's orbiting. These ghostly encounters have been captured on many videos and in photographs, and can be white, gray, or even black. Although they can simply appear this way, linger, then move away quickly, sometimes ectoplasms appear before becoming the full-bodied apparition. So I remember seeing some mist before and not see a full-bodied apparition. As a matter of fact, it was on my bed. I saw what was like a gray mist. I say it ran across my pillow because I was pretty certain it was a cat, that one of our cats that had passed, and I was pretty certain it was one of the cats that ran across my pillow, but it only appeared as a gray mist whenever it ran. So I know I've seen that before. Have you?
Actually, I had an unusual occurrence with one of the game cameras years ago. Because setting up when you live on the side of a mountain, you want to see what all is in your yard when you're not looking.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll have to see if I can find the actual picture. It's been a while, but it looked like it was all mist, and it almost looked like it had wings. It was just unusually shaped. So I'll have to see if I can find that. But it looked really cool. But it was definitely not solid, but you couldn't see through it. It was kind of like a whitish, smoky look to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the game camera caught it. I don't know what it was trying to manifest. And of course, it could have been an animal, it could have been who knows what, if that had crossed over and was manifesting.
Right.
But it's a really, really cool picture. If I find it, I'll send it to you to put on the Facebook.
Yeah, I think I remember that picture.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
It had a lot of flow to it. There was a lot of flow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's no way that it was a natural, just foggy moment because of the way that the flow went. It had definite curvature.
Yeah, and at least from what I remember of that picture and from what I remember of the one on my bed, it wasn't like you blew out a candle or something in that kind of smoke. It's
Right.
It's not like that at all. It really kind of almost has a shape to it, but then doesn't. It's like a cloud in the sky, kind of how they go puffed out. I don't know.
Yes.
It's kind of hard, like brushed out, and stuff like that. I mean, it's really, really neat. They're kind of solid, but yet not. You could see through them. It was just really weird experience.
But you kind of sense it when you see it.
Yeah, there's definitely a feeling.
Yes, you get the energy.
Right, when you experience. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to know if anybody else out there's experienced anything like that. And if you have, feel free to email us at psychicbent1@gmail.com. Okay, so the next one
was that a commercial break?
It was.
Okay. All right.
Or even comment on the episode on where you're streaming it. Anyway, the next one is the poltergeist. Now, we've already talked about poltergeist in a previous episode with energy. It's perhaps one of the most popular terms most of us have heard of when it comes to ghosts. The word poltergeist actually means noisy ghost because it is said to have the ability to move or knock things over, make noise, and manipulate the physical environment. While many of us have heard this term before, and of course we've talked about it, a poltergeist is actually one of the rarest forms of hauntings, and to many the most terrifying, which you can agree with that. I mean, things move, and it's just really a scary thing that happens.
But yeah, you have things thrown at you. You have all the cabinets open up in the kitchen. It's
Right.
really creepy.
Right. Other examples are like the loud knocking sounds, doors slamming, fires breaking out mysteriously, have all been attributed to this type of spiritual disturbance. So another frightening aspect of the poltergeist is that the event usually starts out slowly and mildly and then begins to intensify. And while many times poltergeist activity is harmless and ends quickly, they have been known to actually become dangerous. Some experts explain it as a mass form of energy that a living person is controlling unknowingly. So that is what we talked about in the previous episode, that a lot of times it's tied to a pubescent female who has all those hormones and emotions and everything, and their psychic energies are just really exploding and getting intense, and then all that energy, I guess you say, swirls together and forms this poltergeist to happen. And a lot of times once they move past that critical time in their development, that poltergeist tends to slow down, die down, and can disappear. You have anything else to add to poltergeist?
Nope.
Okay. The next one is orbs. And orbs are probably the most photographed type of anomaly. They appear as a transparent or translucent ball of light that is hovering over the ground. Many ghost hunters and guests on ghost shows and such are surprised to see them in their photos. It is believed that orbs are the soul of a human or even an animal that has died and is traveling around from one place to another. The circular shape they take on makes it easier for them to move around and is often the first state they appear in before they become a full-bodied apparition. So if you're lucky enough, you can capture one of those in video or on film. But a lot of people tend to debunk these orbs as being dust or bugs because sometimes they are, especially if
Well,
you're
it
doing
depends
this
on
at night.
it depends on what the orb is doing.
Right.
I mean, if it's acting like an insect flying around, then that's going to be a bug.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's just hovering and not moving, just staying still, well, that's not going to be an insect.
Right. Or dust.
Or dust, because dust is falling. Yeah, dust is going to be moving. So if it's moving with a purpose, that's not flitting around like a bug would do, but it's going to a straight line and then it goes down and then it's very purposefully moving, that is an orb. But orbs are a lot of times debunked during paranormal investigations just because you have to really study the movements of the orb to see what it's doing. And if it's not moving, then obviously, and just hovering, then that is more than likely. Or if it's moving slowly and then it just goes back this way, a bug's not going to move slowly.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
And dust doesn't do that.
And like in some of the investigations, I can't remember which one I watched, they had an orb appear and it looked like it went through the investigator from one side to the other, or it may have been a cameraman. Yeah, it was someone that was there on the staff. It looked like it went through them and they felt cold. They didn't know it happened until they went back and reviewed it, but they even said, "Oh, that I'm real cold all of a sudden," and they had video of it going through them.
Well, that's obviously not a bug.
Right. I'm just saying a lot of people just automatically write it off as
Yes.
the other two instead of, and it's kind of hard to tell with just a still photo what it is.
Exactly.
You really need
video.
Video, yeah, the motion to follow it and everything. So, okay, then the next one I have is called a funnel ghost. And I've not heard of this one before. So this is most often spotted in homes and old historic buildings. The funnel ghost or vortex is frequently associated with a cold spot. They usually take on the shape of a swirling funnel, and most paranormal experts believe they are a loved one returning for a visit or even a former resident of the home. They are appearing as a wisp of light or a swirling spiral of light. They are often caught in photographs or on video. I'm thinking that's maybe what you and Monique had experienced. If it was just a cold spot, but was it a swirling cold spot, or do you think it was just a standing still?
I couldn't see anything spinning. I just knew they were there.
Mm.
You know how that is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I could not say they were spinning or not, but they obviously knew what I was doing, and I let them know what we're going to do, and they were fine
Right.
with it. So
Yeah, yeah. I've never seen a funnel ghost before. Like I
yeah.
said, I didn't even know that existed. So, do you have anything else on that?
Nope.
The one other thing that I did want to mention, and it would be, I think this would primarily be with the ghost side and not the spirit side, because the spirits are there to help you and assist you, whereas the ghost ones are the ones that could be more angsty and whatnot. But don't be afraid to set up the boundaries. It's your place now. It's your doings. they need to respect you and your place and your things. And if they can't, then you have to set up your boundaries and draw your lines there.
And if you're looking to have a house cleansing, reach out to a local paranormal group, and they could more than likely put you in touch with either a team member of theirs that does do the cleansings or someone that they've used before for cleansing areas and properties. You really need to know what you're doing if you're trying to cleanse a property.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I hear so many times that people, well, I smudge, but they never opened a door or window to allow the energy to get out.
Right.
You know, so they didn't properly get all the corners. They didn't properly go from top to bottom. They just kind of walked around burning incense and nothing happened because, well, yeah, you didn't do anything. You just burned some incense. So please reach out to someone who knows what they're doing. If you're experiencing a ghost that's mischievous or just a ghost and you want it gone, have someone who knows how to do a cleansing to come in, because different types of haunts require different types of procedures when pertaining to doing a house cleansing. Sometimes it requires black salt, sometimes it requires sea salt, in addition to the smudging process, creating barriers and windows and doors with the salt, four corners of a room. There's different levels of a haunt.
Sure.
So you need someone who can do this the correct way.
Because it could even require an exorcism of the house.
Depending on what is haunting.
Exactly.
Yes. So you really should reach out to someone who has experience with house cleansings and house clearings to come in, walk through, and see what needs to be done. You don't want to aggravate what is in your home. You know, and you can do that by not knowing how to do a proper cleansing.
Sure. But before it gets to that point, you can easily, like for instance, what happened when my daughter's pushed down the stairs and I said, you are never to touch her again. And she was never touched again. I mean, that was setting up a boundary.
Yes.
I didn't say you had to get out. I said, you will not touch her again. And she was never touched again. Granted, we probably should have gotten somebody in to do something. But that is also a boundary. But sometimes it requires, like you said, it requires more.
And if you have someone that, a psychic that does cleansings, not all psychics do. Not all psychic mediums do, the house cleansing and the house clearing. You have to have someone who has a passion for it. But you need to understand that there's certain things as a homeowner you need to do as well.
Right.
There's certain types of entities that you can't get rid of the first time. So they're going to require that you go back through weekly and you smudge and redo the smudging. And if you don't do that, then it's kind of on you.
Right.
It's like...
Yeah, it has to be, be done like regular house cleaning or whatever. Sometimes
yes,
it really does.
I mean, yeah. And, if you have a psychic come in and can get an idea of what is actually in the home, and then how the treatment of the home is going to go from there. If you're dealing with something that is a haunting that is linked to a hoodoo or voodoo situation, you need to know how to clear that out. Which that's going to take someone of a specific expertise.
Yeah.
To be able to do that.
Yeah, and it could be something that is tied to the land. And
yes, or a haunted object.
Right, and you have to put up a barricade or whatever you want to call it around the whole house to keep it from coming in, but that doesn't keep it away. It's just keeping it from coming in, and that requires regular maintenance too.
Yes, exactly. So having a psychic come in can let you know, okay, well, you don't really have, the house isn't haunted. That old little record player you got over there, yeah, that's your problem. That's what's haunted. What do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
There's different things you need to figure out.
Yeah, because we all get something from grandma,
yes,
great grandpa, yeah, or just something someone brings in.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so I mean, yeah.
we recently had a haunted, I think, old teapot and saucer, cup and saucer, that was brought into the house that I had to ask the really nice lady that, we're going to enjoy this, so you could go on. I had to move her on. She just stopped by to see who got her teacup.
Who brought that home?
The bonus kid.
I knew it was. I knew.
Yep.
I knew.
Yep.
Okay. She's drawn to these things and she has no idea why.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yep. Just happened to happen
So
before this episode.
So
So
she was, yeah, because she was drawn to it.
Yep.
For a reason.
Yeah.
So we have a listener who has reached out to Kim and I with an incident that happened to her when she was 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And so Kim and I are going to address this listener's letter. Do you want me to read it and then you give what your reading is, or do you want to read it?
Oh, you can read it if you want. That's fine.
Okay. So, listener, hey ladies, would love your input on this incident that happened to me at 14 years old, which at the time was terrifying. For a little context, my entire childhood I felt different. I had a friend in my attic that my parents would tell me didn't exist. My mom would have flowers dead in her flower bed, and I would go out there and pray over them, and the next morning they would be standing up straight with blooms. And I was told, oh, it rained, that's why. They just needed water. But it did not rain, laugh out loud, and the dirt wasn't even wet. Fast forward to age 14, my parents and I were about to move to a neighboring county. I was in middle school and like an angsty teenager was digging in my heels, making it known I did not want to go and change schools. So my parents allowed me one last sleepover with my best friends. This was in the year 2006. We still had the bulky TVs from the 80s and 90s. Man, those things were heavy.
Oh, they were.
And she had one in her room. I do not remember what time it happened, but I know we were laying there trying to go to bed when all of a sudden the TV made a popping noise that made me sit up straight in the bed. And when we sat up straight, there was an image on the wall. It was almost like there was a light shining through the window, which was impossible as we were on the second floor of the home living in a secluded area, and it was perfectly lit square, but inside it looked like tree branches, but couldn't be because there were no trees that close to the window. That if someone had been outside with a light in the neighboring woods, they would have had to have been way out there. But that also means the light wouldn't have been as bright or a perfect square on the wall. There were so many lines that were jagged and thrown everywhere. It was chaotic. And while this was happening, I'm frozen in my bed. I can't move, and my brain is trying to make sense of what I'm seeing, trying to see something in the abstract. I never could, and it seemed to go on forever. And then after a period of time, the TV popped again, and it was like someone turned the light off. If memory serves me correctly, I do believe my friends seen it. Obviously, my parents didn't believe me. After this happened, we moved, and coincidentally enough, that was the last time I'd ever seen anything so vividly. I have seen shadows and glimpses when I meditate. I can picture things, but not anything that vivid. After being told most of my life, you're seeing things and that's not real, you start to turn it off, and only in the most recent years have I started to try and open myself back up again. And trying to get there yourself back open after having turned it off for so long is harder than I anticipated. But y'all's podcast has helped me, so thank you. She's in a little heart emoji, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about what happened.
Okay. Thank you, listener. I really found this to be interesting because she is psychic, obviously, and we know that her friend in the attic was really a ghost. It was someone that was there to keep her entertained, more or less. It was someone that was drawn to her. I think that she was also a plant empath and a healer, and that she was being guided at that point in time to heal plants. And I get that being shut off with the negative reinforcement that was being instilled in her mind, that oh no, that you didn't do anything. It just needed water. That's all it was, kind of thing. So I do think she kind of had some strong plant empath going on there with her. I also think that with her being the angsty teenager, and I think she realized in her subconscious or in her psychic abilities, I don't know, I think she kind of was getting the picture that this was all going to shut down if she moved. And she wasn't going to be able to stop it. And I think that pop of that TV was her opening up a portal that she could have escaped through, but she was too terrified and frightened of what happened, like who wouldn't be, to go into this portal. And when it popped, that pop shut down all of her abilities because she wasn't going to be able to use them where she was going. They weren't going to serve her at that point in time. That was my interpretation. What do you think?
Well, I thought it was interesting when, let me find it in the email, that she was seeing something in the abstract.
Mm-hmm.
And she couldn't get her finger, or couldn't put a finger on it in the abstract. And the abstract is something that's not, I mean, you're 14 years old.
Mm-hmm.
How many 14-year-olds see things in the abstract?
I don't know.
So it's obviously with something coming through. I almost wondered at one point if there was a PK type manifestation, because she's obviously psychic.
Mm-hmm.
She was obviously going through a very emotional and traumatic event. The one last thing to appease her before moving on is having a sleepover. And this is the last time she's going to see these friends.
Yeah, true. That could be too.
Yeah, so I was almost wondering if some of that was a PK manifestation or a poltergeist causing that to happen.
That could be. I didn't even think about it being a poltergeist.
Because 14 years old,
Mm-hmm.
perfect age group for that. She's going through something traumatic.
Yeah.
Her obviously was an ungrounded psychic, because who isn't ungrounded as a psychic as a teenager?
Mm-hmm. True.
Even if you're not psychic, you're not grounded, So I was wondering if that could have been a little bit of a PK manifestation going on.
Well, that could be.
But I definitely agree with the plant empath,
Mm-hmm.
a nurturer,
Right.
which again is an empath, very much tied to an earth symbol, so, earth tie. So yeah, it's quite interesting. But when she obviously shut her abilities down at this point. So the popping out could have been a pop out of everything.
Right. Shut it down. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when it's that, I feel that when it's that drastic or that hard of a shutdown, it is going to take you a lot longer to work through everything in your mind and in your head and in your heart to open up those abilities back up again. It's just because you have literally just shut it down. There was no gradual, okay, no, maybe not, maybe not, maybe not. No, it was like, done. I can't take it with me. You know what I mean?
Yes. And, obviously, if the parents were not being encouraging when she would be open with them at the age of 14, you're at that where you're not an adult, but you're not a child anymore age.
Mm-hmm.
And so you start behaving differently at that age.
Right.
And as a 14, you're a teenager, you're moving into a new school system
Mm-hmm.
in the next county. You don't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to stand out for the wrong reasons.
Right.
So I could see where there possibly was a subconscious, I need to shut this down.
Right.
As a self-preservation.
Right. Because she didn't know what she was getting into, where she was going to be going. It was all going to be new.
Right. And she wasn't getting any parental support for the things that she was communicating.
Right. Yeah. It looks like she hadn't been getting any of that support or encouragement.
Yes, and that happens to psychic children quite a bit.
Yeah. I'm not knocking her
As
parents at all. That's just
yeah,
the unknown is terrifying to people.
right. Yes, yes. Yeah, I definitely believe that psychic child,
Hmm.
empath,
Hmm.
strong plant empath. I'm also kind of thinking she's probably an emotional empath because she was picking up things that she's not aware of she was picking up for her to be able to shut her abilities down.
Oh, yeah. Good point. Yeah.
So I really firmly believe that she is, not was, but she is an emotional empath
Hmm.
because she would have picked up on things that she didn't understand, and that's why she shut things down.
Right.
And she would have been picking up more of what her parents were thinking versus what they were actually saying, or what they were feeling versus what they were saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. And why she needed to shut it down. Yep. Exactly.
Yes,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a very sensitive age, your preteen during young teen years, and she probably needed to shut it down to start over in a brand new environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you go about reopening your abilities, which we've all shut down at some point,
Hmm.
and then done the work, and it's a lot of work to get your abilities open and get going again, as a psychic, and then learning how to shut it down when you need to shut it down and turn it back on when you need to turn it on.
Right.
I mean, so there is a lot of work, but when you shut yourself down cold turkey, so to speak, it is hard to get back going
Hmm.
because usually something very traumatic in your life has happened to make you shut it down.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we moved when I was in 5th grade, halfway through the school year. Mom and Dad sold the house we were living in and moved to the haunted house, which was down a couple blocks on the same street, but put me in a new school district.
Hmm.
So everybody I grew up with from kindergarten on that I knew, I now at 5th grade, and I'm not even a teenager or a preteen,
Hmm.
is now having to start in a brand new school where I don't know anybody. So I totally understand where her thought process was.
Hmm.
Because you go into a school, these people had been going to schools like at my other school from kindergarten on. Everybody knew everybody.
Right.
When I just went to my class reunion, I had to be like, okay, wait, which grade school did I go to school with you at?
Yeah.
Which one do I know you from?
Yeah.
And it had to be, where did you go to junior high? Because that's going to be the tiebreaker right there, how I know you.
That's right.
Is
Exactly.
it from this grade school or this grade school? And normally when you grow up, you don't move around a lot. You don't know what that's like.
Hmm.
We learned early on how to make friends
Yeah.
in a new school. Like, okay, well, you continued on with your school. You didn't have to move, did you?
Uh, Correct. I continued on
Yes.
with my class. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to move
Hmm.
to a different school.
Hmm.
And a different grade school, a different junior high, and of course the high school, everybody was dumped into the same building, and so you get reunited with people that you've left behind. But it's very traumatic to these people that you've been in kindergarten with, and you grow up with, go through all these different classes with. All of a sudden you're like, okay, now I don't know anybody, and that first day of school, the school year is half over, and you're walking in, and it's quite intimidating. And if you add psychic abilities on top of that,
Yeah.
that I could see where spirit may have helped her shut this down.
Right.
Because going into a new location where you don't know everybody, and everybody's spent all these years together growing up at, knowing each other, and now you're the new person, the new kid, that's hard to do without being an empath and a psychic.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here trying to picture how it would be for a psychic empath walking in a first day of school and not knowing anybody, but yet hearing and feeling all of the judgment
It's
that's coming your
Yeah,
way. Because there's
it's not
judgment.
it's not fun. I can tell you that. It's
Hmm.
not fun.
Yeah.
But as with most empaths and psychic children, you learn early on you're reading a room and you don't realize you're doing it.
Right. Yeah.
You're summing up, okay, I'm going to stay away from you, and oh, you look like someone okay, I'm going to go over and talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the benefit of being a psychic child. Even if you're not aware that you're doing it, you're reading a room, you're picking up who is the person that's most likely going to be nice to me. That is you. Okay, I'm going over here. I'm going to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because normally as a new kid, people don't approach you.
Yeah, they look and judge.
So it's up to you to, so I totally get why her abilities got shut down.
Mm-hmm.
Because it might have been too much for her to handle, especially if she wasn't grounded, which, okay, well, in 2006, who's talking about grounding?
True. That's a good point. But you'll get back there. She'll get back there.
She will.
It just takes time.
Obviously, she's working on it. She's listening to our podcast.
That's right. And it does.
Thank you, listener.
Yeah, and it's going to take work. It's not just going to be one day it just turns back on. It's you probably going to have to revisit and work through what it was you were going through at that time in your life when it shut down. The emotions.
But trust me, you don't want it to all switch back on at once.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you don't want that. You want to go through the process of the meditation, the journaling, working through things.
Correct.
When you've had parental units that don't believe you, ours started to come around because it was getting obvious that, okay, yeah, it's obvious we've got ghosts in the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious that this is going on. And having a great grandmother that was psychic, that kind of like was there in the background going, well, grandma was psychic. Why? What's the problem here? Our parents kind of they didn't like to agree with it. They didn't like to admit it, but they knew it was there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm just saying eventually everyone ends up that wants to turn them on does have to work through that process back then on what it was that caused you to truly shut it down. Sometimes there's emotional ties, there's emotional thoughts, there's whatever could be, whatever went on back then. I'm still facing some of mine, so working through them.
Well, it's a process,
right?
And I think, and when you think about it, there's things that you don't realize you need to process until they pop up. Like, oh, didn't know you were there. Okay, thanks for popping in right now. Let's see what we can do about fixing that.
Yeah.
There's those kind of things.
Yeah, good point. Okay. Well, thank you so much, listener, for sending in that story. We hope we've helped you with it.
Well, you think about it, it really put a lot for her to put herself out there to even send that story in. So I think that's amazing.
I agree. I totally agree. We're proud of you.
So I guess, yes, we are proud of you. So I guess this concludes this episode of Psychic Bent.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, listeners, for listening to Psychic Bent. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We had a lot of fun putting it together. Please reach out to us on our Facebook page, like and follow. And if you have any stories you'd like to send in, please do. And Kim's going to give you the email address.
It's psychicbent1@gmail.com.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. May your light shine bright.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast, Psychic Bent. If you enjoyed Psychic Bent, please like, follow, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to Psychic Bent. We can be reached on Facebook at Psychic Bent Podcast. Our email address is psychicbent1@gmail.com. May your light shine bright.